Can we talk for a minute about our Integrating Heart and Mind workshop?
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's coming up in the fall of 2024.
I'm so excited. We changed the format to make it more accessible to people with like work schedules and personal schedules. And so this time we're going to do it 3 hours on a Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at, and 5 hours on Saturday for 2 different weeks in September.
Yeah, it's so great. Like if you're finding yourself stuck in like sticky bad patterns or having communication issues or something like that, or if you want to just like get closer and trust yourself or your partner more, this is the workshop for you.
Yeah, and individuals are welcome, couples are welcome. If you're interested in really thinking through how to serve yourself well inside of your relationships, then we've built a workshop that will support you in finding the ways that are just right for you.
To sign up, head over to our website at whydoesmypartner.com/events.
We hope you'll join us. Welcome to the Why Doesn't My Partner podcast.
I'm Jules.
I'm Vicky.
And I'm Rebecca. We're your hosts. We're also couples therapists and messy humans bumbling through our own relationships every day.
We met through our training and practice of relational life therapy. Between us, we have more than 40 years of experience holding hard relational questions with our clients. We're going to bring those questions here.
And together, we're going to take a stab at answering those questions. This podcast is not a substitute for therapy. If something you hear in this podcast stirs something deep within you about your relationship, reach out to a couples therapist in your area.
All right, and let's dive in with today's listener question.
Why does my partner tell me what to do?
Why does my partner tell me what to do? Gosh, there are so many reasons. And there are so many different things I'm thinking of right here already. Jules, you look like you're about to get out of your seat.
I was saying because they're a jerk face. No, we know that's not why.
Now?
I turned into a 4-year-old.
I want to jump in and address quickly that my voice sounds different in this episode because I'm calling in by phone because in my humanness, I don't have the right cord for my computer and the volume wasn't working. So I sound different than I have in other ones. And hopefully we will get that resolved soon. So there's that.
Yay for humanness.
We love celebrating humanness.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like that. So
Yeah. So what comes up for you, Rebecca, when you hear this question?
You know, there's a few different pieces. I know we chatted about this before we got started, and the three of us were talking about boundaries, and there's a few different kinds of boundary pieces that come up. Mm-hmm. And then there's some other parts for me in particular that I'm thinking about too. But I want to save some of that for a little later, I think, in our conversation. So let's first do some talking about the boundaries.
Yeah. So when my partner's doing or saying anything, one of the ways I keep myself safe is a psychological boundary is what I call it. And Vicky, you actually have a different name for it, but we're talking about exactly the same thing.
We're talking about the same thing. I like to call it the protective boundary. But yeah, they're the same thing. And so we wanted to make that clear that we just use different verbiage.
Yeah, and I use both. Or whatever else comes to mind in the moment. The basic idea is that this is the boundary that, I like to use, have I talked about this before in our episodes? I like to kind of remind people of the old nursery rhyme. I'm rubber, you're glue. Anything you say mean to me bounces off me and sticks to you. Remember that one?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So I use that when I'm talking about this boundary because it very much is like this is the part of me that's learning to discern what's coming into me. Is it mine or do I keep it out here? Like, does it bounce off of me and stick to wherever it came from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think of it as like a psychological space between me and my person. And it could be me and my daughter or me and my husband or me and my friend or me and a client or whoever, me and the grocery store clerk. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So that it's totally safe and fine for them to be different than me, to have a different agenda, to have different wants, to have different needs, and that is not inherently threatening to me.
Threatening.
That takes work to learn, because for so many of us, that's not how we grew up.
Sure.
Like, I just want to honor that for everybody that's listening and is like, what? This takes work to learn. And I think we've talked about second consciousness a little bit in past episodes, which is this idea of relationship mindfulness, where we can kind of be observing enough of ourselves to notice. I think this takes some second consciousness to be aware of that psychological boundary, that protective boundary.
Yep. And if we don't have a good one, we usually like swing all the way to one side or swing all the way to the other, or bounce back and forth. So I could have one that goes way, way too porous, where I let everything in as if it's personal to me, or I could be really rigid, where when I said, oh, another person can have a difference and that's not threatening to me. If you're more on the rigid side, you might hear them go, nothing anyone does is threatening to me. Everything's fine. Right. So that would be more on the rigid side, where I don't take enough in to feel connected to people. So it could go either way, where that psychological or protective boundary is maybe not setting you up to connect with your person like you want to. Yeah. So can I go ahead, Vicki.
I was just going to say, the idea that, Rebecca, it's interesting how you said, like, it blows our mind. The idea that everything that happened around me didn't have to get absorbed by me really was life-changing when I heard that from Terry. I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm one of those totally porous, Jules, that you were just talking about. Everything came in. And I like to tell my clients, up until I learned this stuff from Terry a couple of years ago, I had a sheet on boundaries in my office that I gave people where I looked like I had healthy boundaries. I don't use that sheet anymore because I struggled with that protective or psychological boundary. And so just shifting that lens was life-changing for me. Like, oh, I thought I had healthy boundaries and I really don't in that way. So it was good for me to hear that, like, no, I don't have to absorb everything he's throwing at me right now, or whatever's stressing him out right now. I don't have to be absorbing that and fixing everything for him because I can't handle the tension of it.
In the interest of not making this like an uber long episode, I want to just kind of bring it in, but I also want to make mention of one of the reasons I think some of us have such porous boundaries is because in many ways when we were growing up, we had to carry the stuff that our caregivers should have been carrying and didn't.
Yeah. So we'll either take it on and carry it like the backpack that we load on, or we reject it and we push it out by going really rigid. Yeah. I'm a flip-flopper. So if I'm in a bad boundary space psychologically, I could go way too porous and take everything in personally, or I could go way too rigid and I could actually get really cold looking. So if I'm on it, like, so here's an example. My partner and I have been building a house and we just moved into it and it turned out great and everything's fabulous now. And we were working with a builder and there was a contractor involved who we had so many run-ins. We actually ended up calling him he who must not be named.
Officially, that's his name.
Officially, that's his name. And we were not in a space, right, of controlling the situation because we didn't hire him, because the builder hired him. So he's lying to us. He's doing stuff badly. When we call him on it, he denies it. It was just a run around over and over and over again. We're super frustrating. And if I'm having a good boundary day, here's what it looks like is my husband comes in and he's like, you won't believe what he who must not be named has done. This is so frustrating. You know what we need to do? We need to do this thing right away. We got it. Right. And if I'm in a good psychological boundary day, I can take in what's true and I can keep out what's not true or what's not about me. So one, do I share my husband's frustration with this person? Absolutely. Does it make total sense to me why he's this level upset? 100%. Right. So I can take that in that makes sense that he's feeling this level of anger. Yeah. we have to do something right now. Oh, I can keep that out. I don't know if I agree with that we have to do something right now. Is it true that we probably do need to address this problem? Yes, I agree with him. I do need to address this problem. So now see how you can make it nuanced, where I'm taking in pieces that make a lot of sense to me, but I'm keeping out and letting it be part of his process, which is super important. So one of the things that boundaries do, I think, is they help us respect the other person's journey.
It's like a filter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like this filter that's helping us to discern, like, oh, that's something for me to take in. And that's something that stays out here because it's yours.
Right. Exactly.
Yes.
And then because I feel very safe with that interaction, I can lean into him. I stay connected to him, but not in a managey way, just in like babe, you are right. He is jerking us around. We should drink some water and take a walk. Let's take the dog out and then let's come back and we're going to write an email together. It does sound like we need to address it in some manner. Yeah. And he starts breathing and takes that in because he's getting recognized. But I didn't have to move into management mode. Like, no, it's going to be fine. Calm down. Right. Or I didn't move into cold mode of, well, you're making a big deal out of nothing. So on a good boundary day, I can greet him and help him feel seen in that space, even if he's coming at me with what feels like tell me what to do energy. Right?
Yep. That's what I was just thinking.
So sometimes
he's telling me what to do, and that's how you filter it.
Right, totally. So sometimes people do that because they're upset and they're trying to get themselves safer.
And I think this kind of plays into this other piece is that there's another element in here about how we can see our partners.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I have that good psychological boundary, if I'm having a good psychological boundary day, right? I don't want to call it having a good psychological boundary, a good protective boundary. I like how you said that, Jules.
Yeah, it's not a fixed entity. You're going to have good days and bad days. Some days I do not look like that great partner.
Some days I think I'm having good days and then it blows up in my face. So
I guess this is by how bad I am at this.
What I love though is actually what I love is not when it always goes right, because it doesn't. But what I love is that there are times when it doesn't go right and I go, oh, I see what happened. I get it. You know, and then it's about bringing in some compassion for myself and some compassion for my partner. And when I'm in that place where I feel like my partner is telling me what to do, or picking on me, or where I really need that psychological boundary, if I'm having a good moment with it, if I could bring that compassion to them, if I can bring that kind of what we call cherishing into the relationship, and I can notice like what's happening for them, what are their needs underneath this? Even though it's not coming out so good, what is it that they're really needing? How can I meet that part of them? I don't have to fix it, but how can I see it?
Or even make space to make it more overt. Because sometimes when people are telling somebody what to do, they're in more of like an agenda mode. They're trying to control your behavior, right? And that probably means something scaring or hurting them. So if you can have a good psychological boundary, you can keep enough of that brain online that you can maybe even ask, oh, if I did take that job, what would that be like for you? Or, oh, if I did eat at that restaurant with my girlfriend, are you concerned about something? Or, oh, if I did keep this friendship, what are you thinking might happen, hon? Yeah. So we can move into a space of curiosity. And start to figure out like, oh, is there something we can put on the table that's maybe being danced around a little bit?
I like how you said those pieces too there, Jules. Like, oh, if I did this, what would happen? It makes me, hearing you say those things, feel like, okay, wait, there's room for me to breathe right now and think a little bit more. It creates more of an expansion and openness.
Yeah. And in your world, you would classify that under cherishing behaviors.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of it.
A little bit. I don't know. Yeah, sure.
I love it.
Maybe I'm not having the best psychological boundary day. Yes.
No, totally. No, I'm delighting in this right now because this is my hard space, right? Because I grew up in a super serious family. Like we have It doesn't matter. We have jokes about how serious my family is. Like people tell jokes and people are like, oh no, that's very serious. Like nobody gets a joke in my family. So my poor husband, he's very funny and it's totally lost on me. So here's this piece, because my family's so serious, delight and cherishing and like moving into seeing people deeply or delighting in them or being curious about them is actually not a landscape for me. So it feels like the hardest part about RLT for me to learn. Terry talked about cherishing behaviors and I panicked inside going, what is that? So I just love you guys to name them for me, please.
That is so helpful for me to know, because when I heard you ask if it was in my world, I was like, oh, wait, hold on. And that's where I was like, maybe it was my boundary that was not having the best day.
Right.
Just right there in that moment.
Right in that moment.
Like, yeah. I doubted myself when you asked the question, instead of thinking this is what we're talking about. And here I was.
This is
like,
it happened perfect. Right now.
Yeah. And so I went, oh wait, maybe there's something wrong with me.
I'm asking a question that sounds emotionally loaded. And guess what it was? Because actually this is a vulnerable piece for me, because I actually don't feel like I know a list of cherishing behaviors. But then we guess that emotionally loaded moment means it's something about me or I did something wrong.
Right.
Wrong.
And then we can get into our defense really fast.
But look at what happened instead, the way that we worked that through, and we got curious and we had a conversation about it and we didn't get defensive and we learned something deeper and more intimate about each other.
Totally. And by the way, if you're on the telling someone what to do side of this equation and your partner asks something like this, pause and just taking in that they're curious about you and like risk vulnerability instead of demand.
Ooh. I'm just kind of shaking that off.
That someone being curious about you can be such a different experience too. Like, oh, you want to know about me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I matter.
I saw your eyes go like crazy when I said that, Vicki.
Yeah. My voice matters. Are you sure I should speak up about, like, that curiosity piece is a different experience for, I would say some people. Well, I'll go ahead and out myself. But it's what you both just said, Rebecca, too, about the being seen and being heard.
Yeah. And
having the space to breathe into that and look into, why is this important to me? Why am I hurt? Why am I scared? Mm-hmm. And so many people don't know how to answer that either.
Because it's so vulnerable.
I'm not scared. Yeah. The walls go up. I'm not scared. It's such and such. And go ahead and take that job. I don't care. Like, they can't, it's hard to acknowledge that vulnerability. Yes, I would be hurt by that for these reasons.
So I think we're actually hitting on another part of this question. Why does my partner tell me what to do? Because it's vulnerable to make a direct request.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
And that's the answer. So if you're in the position of telling your partner what to do, try making requests instead. And it's so much more vulnerable because it's possible they will say no.
No.
If it's truly
and
a
they're
request.
allowed to say no. Yes. And they're allowed to say no.
They're allowed to say no. My poor husband has been married. We've been married forever. I don't remember how long. 14 years now, I think. I can't ever remember. He is way better at remembering anniversaries. I told you, I don't do cherishing behaviors. No. So he always has been. He brought me flowers on 10-month anniversary date. I went, it is. So my sweet husband, had to deal with this with me forever. And I feel like I'm still digging myself out of this hole. I'm really good at making it sound like I'm asking you a question, but that does not mean I was asking you a question. Say, I remember we were redoing a house one time and he was suggesting this cool, like contemporary, like baseboard thing. And I went onto the computer and was like, is this really what you want? Maybe. I mean, I guess we could do that. I mean, is this really okay to do it this way? That was not a request. Are you sure? Maybe we should do it the traditional way. What do you think? That was not a request. He knew he was going to be like, oh, I was going to be upset for weeks. Poor sweetie. And so now that I'm figured it out, like, oh, Jules, you are asking questions, but they are not questions. And he knows it. That I am now in a space where I'm really clear about that. I try really hard not to do it. I try really hard to move into the vulnerability and just ask directly for what I want. And I still mess it up all the time. And sometimes he's like leaning into the memory of what it's been like in the past in our marriage too. So I'm still digging myself out of that one.
I'm digging myself out of stuff like that with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're so not alone. And I just want to highlight for our listeners what a direct request is. We've talked about it in past episodes, but I think this is one of those things that like we could keep talking about and people are still like, oh, there's like more layers to it, you know? So a direct request is something that you put out there like with clarity. This is what I want. This is what would help me. And it's okay if your partner can't meet you there.
That's the key. It is okay if your partner can't meet you there.
And I actually do have a quick example of that. I was making dinner. I used that term loosely a few weeks ago because it was leftovers. So I was heating up all the leftovers, and my husband was standing near me in the kitchen playing on his phone. And I looked over and I said, "Could you put the salad together?" And putting the salad together, by the way, is taking a handful of lettuce out of a bag and then a handful of cherry tomatoes and a handful of carrots. It's not like we like make a salad. We don't cut anything either. So I said, while I'm doing the leftovers, can you make the salad? And he kind of looked at me and he said something funny like, can I pretend I didn't hear you so I don't have to do it? And I smiled and said, sweetheart, that was a request. You're allowed to say no. And he looked at me and he said, no. And I said, okay. And I made the salad. And we moved on with our night, and it was no big deal at all. But that was after we'd had this huge conversation of direct request versus demand. And so we're both getting used to you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say no. And I will deal with that no if it's a no.
You know what I love about this is if you've had a conversation, like a more meta conversation, like we talk about a lot with your partner, and you've set this up. I love, Vicky, what you guys are doing is you're kind of naming the meta conversation again. So in that moment, you're saying, it's a request, honey. It's okay to say no. It's kind of like a reminder of this new thing we're working on. So if you are making a shift in your relationship, it's helpful to make it over these reminders of like, oh, we're changing this now.
Yes. So much I think of marriage, I'll say, is like, or I shouldn't have to say it so many times. Why haven't you just learned this by now? And I'm on the opposite side of like, say it over and over again. Do the constant reminders. I don't mind if every single time I make a request, I have to tell them, remember, you're allowed to say no. It makes things so much easier on the other side.
God, I hope that I have to keep learning throughout like all the years that I'm together with my spouse. You know, like if we stay the way we were when we met each other, holy cow, there was so much growth ahead of us. Like there was so much healing for both of us to do. Yeah. Those little baby us's, like there's so much potential for them. You know, I'm the baby us's. And I still think like, you know, by the time, at some point, like who we are today is going to be a baby version or toddler version of us. You know?
Yeah. So we know you're on a lifelong journey with us. Thank you for being part of it. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
That wraps up this week's episode. Join us again next week for another Why Does My Partner?
We hope that you continue to listen wherever you get your audio and that you'll follow the show.
To go deeper, join us at our bootcamp. You'll find the next date at whydoesmypartner.com.